Alright, so let me explain why I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Is in fact not too expensive. Please feel free to chime in with your thoughts. I really want this to be a discussion, and I just want to throw a couple things out there that I think, and obviously it's just my opinion, so yeah, feel free to share yours in the comments down below. However, if you like the video, also like it while you're at it. So yeah, it's a bit of a touchy topic, I realized that, and it's been what's pretty much been happening lately in the community. It's been the talk. I genuinely don't think it's too expensive, but I do want to explain my viewpoints. So yeah, the first question I think we need to ask ourselves is, why do we actually play the game? What's our ultimate goal, and how do we feel rewarded? Is that by just playing with our friends, by going to events, by doing well at events and being highly competitive? And that's Yu-Gi-Oh! As a whole. Like, competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! And the just Yu-Gi-Oh! I think have to be separated. And a lot of times I feel like we kind of blur the line between those two, and we tend to complain about, how expensive cards are, when in reality, some people just play to have fun, to play with their friends, or to even play on simulators and not actually have cards in real life. So once you kind of decide what category you fall into, then you can really think about, the actual prices of cards. And if spending for those cards is actually something you can balance out by, the ultimate goal you're trying to accomplish. So let's say you're playing just for fun. Then you can pretty much play any format you like. You can just play with your friends, for example. And right now, if we're taking a look at Edison, GOAT, any kind of other Ultimate Time Wizard type format, or like Heart of the Underdog formats that are also not that popular, but a thing out there, then you can get decks for very, very cheap. And I'm talking like $30 or something. I think it's going to be under $50 or something like that you're going to be spending to get a viable deck that you can play in any type of format, or if you're playing some kind of format that you actually played in when it was happening, then you can still play as like a throwback type of Time Wizard thing. Like, if you own your Thunder Dragon deck or like your full power Sky Striker deck from back in the day, you can just play some kind of toss format matches and not have to spend a single dollar to actually have fun at the game you're playing. So yeah, I think, again, we have to differentiate between competitive game that's ever evolving and something that you just genuinely have fun at doing. Another part of this is just simulators, like I said before, or DB, for example, that has free access to every single card out there, where you can test and you can really decide if, for example, you're competitive, because usually that's what DB is going to be for, unless you're playing like Edison Ladder or something. If you test out the cards there, you're not spending any amount of money. And then you can decide if it's actually going to be worth it to purchase them in real life once you see if the deck suits you, if you're comfortable with it, good with it, if you really feel it, And once you make your choice and you kind of realize, like I said before, what kind of category you fall into, and for example, you choose to be very competitive, once you make that decision, it's also going to come hand in hand with tournament expenses. Because if you're really competitive, you're trying to go, I assume, to as many events as possible. You're maybe even doing the World's Points grind. And at that point, you're spending a ton for travel accommodation as well. And some people are going to say, well, if I have to spend all of that for traveling, I shouldn't spend almost as much money for cards as well. And I totally get you. But again, at the end of the day, it's completely your choice. And if you know that you're capable to pay for your travel expenses, then I assume you're also capable to pay for some cards, because it's going to, again, kind of balance itself out, and it's going to be worth it, because you're going to be able to go to these events and also probably be successful. Because, at least as the way I kind of function, if I decide to go to any event, it doesn't need to be something that's like gonna be really expensive to go to, or something that I necessarily have to travel to for a long time or sleep there or whatever. If I decide to go to an event, I want to test a lot, I want to feel prepared, because it's not going to feel worth it to me to even spend for, in a registration if I'm not comfortable and if I feel like I don't have fairly decent chances of topping. So if you make that choice and then you spend for travel, then I assume you're also going to spend for the cards, because once you top, that kind of goal is probably going to be fulfilled. It's going to be, the goal of doing well, of topping, and then also you do get prizes. Like, of course, Yu-Gi-Oh's prizes aren't something to really brag about if we're being completely honest. But what you can do is flip them. And that's the next part of this video, I guess I wanna get to, is what can you do to really, I'd like to say, put Yu-Gi-Oh into Yu-Gi-Oh. And it just means that you kind of flip your prizes, what you can pull, and you can also trade. Like, I feel like that's something that's completely underrated, and I totally understand you're not going to be able to trade for like an entire Sinful Spoils engine, or you might be. But if you've been in the game for some time, or if you're like just really interested in being part of this game, I assume you have gathered up a bit of a collection, and you can trade, and you also, like I said before, pull stuff from prize packs or just packs when you register. So, and I've always done this. Like, I was in high school, I had a scholarship of literally 100 euros or something like that per month, and we still had the most competitive decks, and we were just grinding and trying really hard to trade and to get cards and to go to events, and it was purely out of love for the game. And I feel like that's, at the end of the day, something we all feel. I guess the next thing I want to talk about is, once you decide you want to be competitive, you're also going to be looking at getting staples. And that was kind of tough. Like, again, when I started, Ash was like one of the most expensive cards out there, and you really needed it. If you had Ash, it was like the difference was just apparent, I feel like. And right now they did the rarity collection, and even though some sets throughout the year are kind of subpar, they're still trying really, really hard with some of these reprint sets. We have to be honest, and we have to give Konami props when it comes to that. You can get the majority, or like 99.9% of staples for very, very cheap. And they still do some cringy stuff from time to time, like short print the out of Thrust, for example. But we do get the rarity collection with a lot of different rarities, which is definitely modeled after OCG, and I think that's awesome. It would be great if we got this for main sets as well. I don't think it's happening, or I have doubts about it, but still, it is a step in the right direction, and staples are insanely important. And if you're really, really competitive, of course you're going to have to get the next best deck and the next best engine. Another way you can deal with that is to borrow cards. That's also a thing, because at the end of the day, like, you're going to locals and you did probably build a friend group and a group of people you test with at least, which maybe they don't always go to events, like all of them, and you might like borrow cards. I don't know, like sometimes it's obviously gonna happen, like someone's gonna want to go to an event, they want to play that deck, you won't be able to borrow it every single time, like that just makes sense. But sometimes you can also do that. That's an option. Another thing that you can do is, if you have the time or the passion to do it, or the willingness, you can take a look at the market. I mean, really take a look. Like, you're going to see some patterns, and there's also a ton of content out there, mine included, about cards that are going to spike and maybe going down in price, so you can, sell them as soon as possible and you make as much money as possible. And again, it's going to be my little quote of Yu-Gi-Oh goes into Yu-Gi-Oh. Like, if you see a secret rare, for example, from a set that's like just seems really good, like, and there's so many examples out there, and it always happens. A set drops, and then there's a card in there. For example, Despotter. Despotter was 10 euros. I got it for like 10, I think it was like 10 to 15 euros. And then it went up, and it just keeps on happening. Flamberge Dragon. That's another one. That's a really, really good recent example. If you have sort of the little skill that it takes to just take a look at some patterns that happened before, I think you can stay ahead of the curve, and you can get some cards and then sell them later and make the profit and turn that into Yu-Gi-Oh! Make cards more accessible for you because you spent less money upon release. And that also goes for like archetypes, for example, that don't seem insane, but you kind of know that with the correct card, with the correct support, it's going to be busted. Like Rescue Ace wasn't that expensive upon release, and it was definitely, priced higher once the months passed and we saw OCG and we saw everything that's happening and the support dropped and all of that. So again, if you have a bit of a foresight, I think you're going to be fine, and you can make a lot of profit actually. And I've talked about being competitive and going to events and all of that, but you also need to ask yourself how many events you're actually going to, and if you really do need the most expensive cards to go there and to do fairly well. Because if you're only playing locals, which is kind of more of a casual type of, playing Yu-Gi-Oh!, you probably don't need like SP or 2 copies of SP even. There are some decks that play it, or like you're playing Labyrinth, but you don't currently own like 3 Chaos Angel, which is fine. You can get one, for example, you can get another one later. And I've said this also a ton on the channel actually, and I always get some kind of like, people just like to beef with me when it comes to like budget and stuff like that. And I always say this, you can add on top of things. You can always get a core and then later on get cards that are more expensive, for example, for the extra deck. Because you're almost always going to be able to build a version that doesn't necessarily need those cards. For example, Labyrinth is a really good case. That's why I talked about this. Like, Chaos Angel is going to be insane, but I think you should be fine if you have 1 or 2 or even none of them and you just build a bit of a different version. Like, if you just enjoy the game at the end of the day, I feel like you're gonna make it work. And if you enjoy just when you're really, really competitive and you're doing well consistently and you have the best decks and the best cards and all of that, then that's something you need to realize about yourself, and you're gonna probably have to just try really hard to achieve that, whether that's just literally putting some money aside specifically for Yu-Gi-Oh! Because that's what you want to do, or if you just really enjoy playing and you don't necessarily have to go to every event to feel fulfilled, you can just play on DB. So I guess the entire point of this video is I just want to make a case for the fact that you can enjoy playing this game just for what it is, and you don't necessarily have to spend a ton of money, because there's always some alternatives that you can do, formats that you can play, simulators that you can use. You can play Master Duel, which is gonna cost some, but if you grind, that shouldn't be an issue, I think. And you can still have fun, because we all just love the game. At least I assume so. So I don't know, hopefully I made a couple points, and if you agree or disagree, I would really love to know your thoughts, and we can have a discussion in the comments down below. And yeah, like the video if you enjoyed it, and let me know if you actually want me to make these types of videos and I share my thoughts on topics, if you want that type of content. So yeah, like I said before, like the video, make sure you are subbed and ding the bell so you're notified when I post, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.